The man opens the exam paper and is stunned by the question. How many teeth does a mosquito have? Seeing the options below, he becomes even more embarrassed. This is a civil service exam in India. There are over 50 such bizarre questions. The exam not only has a lot of little-known knowledge but also full of strange questions. For example, what doesn't have a body, but has a head and a tail? Quote, going back to India in 1997. At this time, the economy was in a window period. The population was increasing rapidly, making labor prices extremely cheap. To earn a living, Indian people in the lower class had to compete with each other. A good job not only supports the survival of a family but also represents status. In such a context, the civil service exam became the only ladder for Indian youth to change their lives. However, the difficulty of this exam made many people shake their heads. In 1997, India had 3.05 million people participating in the exam and only 500 were recruited. Although the exam was extremely difficult, every year many young people still strive for a glimmer of hope. In the Chambal region of northern India, Manoj, who failed the university entrance exam, is sitting on the roof thinking about the future. Because many students cheated, all exam results were invalidated. No results mean he cannot go to university. While Manoj was thinking about whether to carry bricks or cement, a gunshot shattered the quiet of the village. It turned out that his father, an honest man, had accused his superiors of corruption, causing the other person to come back for revenge. To avoid implicating his family, his father decided to go to the city to work as a laborer. But unfortunately, other members of the house were not as lucky. The police came to cause trouble every few days. Although it was just a warning, it made life difficult for Manoj's family. To help the family, Manoj and his brother bought an old tow truck from the black market to transport tourists. Who would have thought that on the first day of driving, they would encounter trouble? An old man who was not even 90 years old was lying by the side of the road, claiming that their truck had hit him. The police were waiting nearby and immediately rushed out. The two brothers were taken to the police station and the team leader hit them with a stick. At this moment, the newly appointed police chief, Dushyant, arrived to investigate. Knowing what had happened, Dushyant took the stick from the team leader and hit the old man who was lying. Did they hit the old man's leg? Yes, that's right, here. The old man who had just demanded to have his leg cut off immediately stood up and ran away. Manoj was completely convinced by Dushyant's image of righteousness and silently vowed to become a righteous police officer. To become a police officer, one must first pass India's judicial exam. For Manoj, the exam was not difficult, but the cost was the problem. He needed money to register in the city and pass the screening before taking the exam. But it was hundreds of kilometers from his home to the city. And Manoj didn't even have money for transportation. Feeling sad about his situation, Manoj confided in his grandmother, who unexpectedly took out a small box of savings, which was all the money she had saved in her life. Although it was only a few hundred rupees, it was enough for Manoj to travel to the city. You must wear your uniform and come back. By then, those bullies won't dare to bully you anymore. Go, go. Encouraged by her words, Manoj made up his mind. Carrying some clothes and money, Manoj boarded a bus towards his dream. But before he could reach his destination, he learned a lesson. Halfway through, Manoj's luggage was stolen by the person sitting behind him. When he discovered it, the thief had already disappeared. All his money was in his bag, and without it, Manoj couldn't even afford a meal. He wandered outside the bus station for 2 days. Unable to bear hunger any longer, he had to enter a restaurant. The kind owner gave him a portion of food. Manoj offered to work to pay for his meal, but was refused by the other party. In the restaurant, he met a person named Pandi. Pandi also came here to attend the judicial exam. Through his words, Manoj learned that due to financial issues, this year's judicial exam was cancelled. Hearing this news, Manoj was momentarily at a loss. He couldn't just go back like this. Pandi told him that although he couldn't take the judicial exam this year, they could take the national exam. This made Manoj feel a little relieved. But to take the national exam, they had to go to Delhi, and Manoj didn't even have money for the fare. Seeing Manoj's difficult situation, Pandi kindly paid for his fare. Halfway through the journey, the two talked about their backgrounds. Pandi comes from a low-class family, but despite his humble background, his father is a well-known businessman. Looking at the bustling crowd, Manoj silently vowed to achieve something for himself. But he didn't know that the national exam in India is not easy. To pass the exam, he will have to spend 12 years preparing. Under Pandi's guidance, Manoj went to a test preparation class run by Baya, a senior who had failed the exam for 8 consecutive years, which gradually extinguished his hopes. He gave up retaking the exam and opened a free test preparation class. Through Baya's words, Manoj understood the entire process of the exam in a systematic way. There are 3 rounds of the civil service exam in India. First, candidates must pass the preliminary round, then the retest, and finally the interview. The preliminary round starts in June, and the results are announced in August every year. The retest is in October of the same year, and the results are announced in January. The interview will be held in March of the following year, and the results will be announced in May. There will be many new candidates in each round. According to India's public data, last year's civil service exam had 2 million registered candidates, but less than 20,000 passed the preliminary round. 99% of these 20,000 people were eliminated in the retest. Only less than 1,000 people persisted until the interview round, and finally only 206 people passed the interview. It can be seen that the passing rate of this exam is as low as it can be. Compared to the passing rate, the exam questions are even more difficult. The content of the questions is diverse, including astronomy, geography, politics, economics, and even little-known knowledge. For example, how many teeth do mosquitoes have, which are all simple questions. As they arrived in August, Manoj and Pandey missed the first registration round, so they had to stay in Delhi. They looked for jobs and studied at the same time. In the blink of an eye, it was June of the following year, and Manoj walked into the exam room with excitement. However, the result was beyond his expectation. 95% of the exam content was in his blind spot. What is the flow rate of the Ganges River in 1 second? When is the dry season? Manoj walked out of the exam room disappointed and even began to doubt himself. Fortunately, Bhaiya was there to encourage him and told Manoj not to give up. In a tea shop, Manoj accidentally met a senior who had passed the exam. Gauri had persisted for 8 years and finally passed the exam. Now Gauri is an intern assistant for the Indian Ministry of Justice. Everyone gathered around Gauri to hear him share his experience. In the following years, Manoj and Pandey continued to supplement their knowledge, studying both geography and natural sciences, including animals. As long as the knowledge was likely to be tested, they did not miss it. In the third year, Manoj finally passed the preliminary round. Bhaiya hugged Manoj excitedly and advised him to register for a professional exam preparation course to prepare for the retake, because the difficulty of the retake was 10 times that of the preliminary round. Bhaiya had taken the exam for 8 years but still had not held the exam paper for the retake. But Manoj didn't have any money. To prepare for the exam, he thought of applying for a part-time job as a runner at a test preparation center, working and studying at the same time. But when he arrived, he discovered that the test preparation center was a scam, and their content was not even as good as Bhaiya's class. Manoj, an honest man, exposed the lies of the exam coaching center and even disrupted a business deal. This time, he accidentally met a girl named Shraddha. Shraddha comes from an affluent family and graduated from a prestigious university. But in India, to become a civil servant, one must pass a national exam. With Manoj's introduction, the two found a night coaching center that specializes in preparing for the exam retake. Despite the coaching center's help, the difficulty of the retake still caused Manoj to struggle. To reduce costs, Manoj set up a study table in a noodle shop, where he studied while the machine kneaded the dough. The noisy environment made Pandey very anxious. He suggested that he could pay for Manoj to rent a quiet room. But Manoj refused. In his eyes, if someone truly wants to learn, not even a noodle machine or a blacksmith's forge would affect them. The retake was quickly approaching, but Manoj's results were still not ideal. Not only did he not pass, but he also wrote the wrong essay, causing him to fail again. Manoj returned home discouraged, planning to give up on the exam and just live his life peacefully. Unexpectedly, as soon as he got home, he learned that his grandmother had passed away a year ago. Because she was worried about how it would affect Manoj's exam, she didn't tell him. Remembering his promise to his grandmother, Manoj gathered the courage to return to the small noodle shop. Seeing his son studying in the corner, the father was extremely moved and tears flowed. In the following years, Manoj went up and down, but ultimately only made it to the retake. Now he is almost 30 years old, and if he cannot pass before the age of 36, he will never have the chance to become a civil servant. Shraddha has been by Manoj's side all these years. Manoj wants to confess his love to her, but he feels unworthy. Only when he passes the exam, he will have the courage to propose. Shraddha also acknowledges Manoj's efforts. She is still waiting. Good things come to those who wait. After struggling and failing for 11 years, Manoj finally passed the preliminary round and was allowed to retake the exam. But 2 consecutive failures made him lose confidence and think of Gauri. Now Gauri is a judge in the Ministry of Justice. Gauri did not refuse when Manoj asked for help. He had a perfect plan for Manoj's exam this time. First of all, Manoj needs to worry not about how good his answers are, but about how to get the highest score in the 7-day exam. Don't waste time on unimportant questions. Bhaiya also heard the news that Manoj was allowed to retake the exam. To help Manoj study in peace, Bhaiya arranged a corner for him in the tea shop, and promised to provide him with food and accommodation. With Gauri's study system and the help of HB, he finally passed the retake exam. Manoj excitedly told Shraddha and his friends about this news, and the quiet tea shop immediately became lively. However, compared to the retake exam, Manoj still needs to overcome a higher mountain, which is the interview round. 99% of candidates are eliminated in the interview round. To make Manoj look more polite, Shraddha bought him a suit and took him to get a haircut and wash his hair. The interview day came quickly, and Manoj was nervous at the interview location. Shraddha gave him a piece of paper, telling him to open it and read it when no one was around. The interview was quite simple, with 6 interviewers asking a few questions based on the candidate's resume. Manoj sat nervously in the middle, waiting for the questions. Who would have thought that the first question asked would be why Manoj didn't pass the university entrance exam? Manoj had planned to lie, but he chose to tell the truth after thinking about his father's teachings. That year, to increase the passing rate, the school allowed cheating by students. Who would have thought that the cheating would be exposed, and the principal would be sent to jail, and all exam results would be cancelled? Although Manoj did not cheat at that time, he was still implicated. Manoj thought that his honesty would be recognized, but he didn't know that this interviewer was not impressed by this. With just one question, Manoj's interview ended. Looking at the 6 judges, Manoj didn't know what to do. He went outside and loosened his tie, thinking that he had failed. It was at this moment that he remembered the note from his girlfriend, and read the words on it, making Manoj smile. Manoj, whether you are a graduate or a civil servant, I will marry you. He thought through everything and left the exam hall with a light heart. 1 month later, the results were announced, and Manoj went to check his score. He thought he didn't pass, so he didn't have much hope. Who would have thought that Shraddha found his name at the top of the list? Hearing Shraddha's news, Manoj sat down on the ground. After 12 years of hard work, he finally achieved his goal. The reason why Manoj passed the interview was because his honesty moved the interviewer. In this way, Manoj finally succeeded and was employed by the Ministry of Justice, becoming a police officer.